Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Annalisa and this is going to be my August wrap-up part 2. So I've got 3 reads for the plus size readathon. I did read the group book, but other than that I didn't stick to the prompts very well. I just read some plus size rap. So first, the Stand-Up Groomsman. This one was pretty good. Something that got on my nerves a lot at the beginning was the hero of the story is a stand-up comedian. Instead of summarizing or talking about little bits of his routines to kind of give us his sense of humor or like what he talked about, the author wrote out a lot of his stand-up, like pages and pages of it, and I didn't find it funny. And the author even says, after having written out one of these sets through the heroine's perspective, that if the heroine read it written out, she probably wouldn't think it was funny and was all in the delivery. If the author recognizes that this wouldn't be funny when written out, why did she write it out? And it wasn't just the first set. These were sprinkled throughout the book. So after the third time it happened, and the third time was a shorter stint, it was only like a paragraph or two. But after that, I decided I was going to skip all of his stand-up segments, and after that I really enjoyed the book. Yeah, I really like the characters. Both our main characters are bisexual, and both of them have been single for a while. One of them has a grandma who is trying to set him up. They're also both Chinese American. His grandma's trying to set him up. She is not so close with her family, and part of the plot is her dealing with her family members. I've been reading a fair amount of books lately that have one of the halves of the romance is dealing with at least slightly toxic family members and like how they work that out. So that's been kind of a fun thing that's been in a few of the romances I've read lately, and so I've enjoyed how it's been handled a lot, and I enjoyed how it was handled in this book. They are brought together by their friends getting married. So they are both in the wedding party, so whenever the wedding party does activities together, they meet up. And at one point they exchange numbers and start texting, and so this is more drawn out than a lot of romances time-wise. A lot of romances will take place over a period of, you know, a few weeks or something, but this one is over the course of about a year and a half. So I liked how that was given time to develop in a different way than happens in a lot of romance novels. I really enjoyed both of their personalities and how they both had issues, but there was a contrast between Mel, our hero, who had been to therapy and like was able to kind of talk himself out of spiraling and keep like his hurts from his youth from affecting how he behaved towards other people, whereas our other main character had not been to therapy and also hadn't done a lot of like introspection in that way on her own. And so when she starts to spiral, she's not able to really stop it. She doesn't have the tools to stop herself and like keep from affecting other people when she's feeling that way. My leg keeps itching, but there's nothing there. It's very frustrating. So I really liked how that contrast was handled, and seeing like how working on your issues affects not only your internal mental health but also how you treat other people. So I ended up giving it 4 stars. Then Tentacles and Teeth. This one I found on KU, and it is a novella that is very heavy on the spice, not a lot of other stuff going on, and it's a monster romance, and it involves a human and a shadow. I don't actually remember what she's called, but I've come across this in other monster romances where they're like people who have magic that manifests as tentacles. Like they're not exactly attached to their body like they would be on a Kraken type creature, but they like are magical manifestations. And then there was a werewolf, and in this case it's a werewolf who transforms into a furry looking thing rather than a human and then a wolf. He has like an in-between type phase, which is not my thing, and I didn't actually realize that that was going to be in there. So the spicy scenes were less to my taste than I was anticipating, because I do like tentacles. I don't like furries in a sexual context. And there were a few other ways in which the spicy scenes turned out not to be totally to my taste because of the specific things they focused on and emphasized. So I ended up giving it 3.5 stars. I did like the personalities of all three main characters. This is a polyamorous situation, and I liked their dynamic, so that's why it gets 3.5 instead of less. And then my Curvy Rival, the group book. This one's also a novella, and it is about two rival gym owners. One's more like a classic type gym, and one is very much focused on feeling good on your body and body positivity, and not like giving anyone even the slightest vibe that the purpose of this place is to lose weight, whereas the other place wants you to track your BMI and stuff like that. So our fat main character is the owner of the inclusive place, and the and our hero is the owner of the other place, and they start off feeling very rivalry towards each other, and there's a little misunderstanding because of a third character, so they kind of butt heads at first, but they immediately feel sexual tension and start getting physical with each other. This is one of the romances that takes place over a very short time, but I felt like it was relatively believable because of how much they were able to open up to each other, and they made each other feel safe very quickly, which leads to more emotional intimacy, and it kind of made sense that they were able to form a fairly strong bond pretty quickly. I really liked our lady main character's best friend. He was great, and this is another one where there were difficult family dynamics on the part of the hero, and so I like to see those, how those were worked through the length of the novella. And ultimately thought it was pretty enjoyable and well done, so I gave it 4.5 stars. Then we have some fantasy. Magic Has No Borders is a collection of fantasy short stories by people from the South Asian diaspora. And so there's a lot of inspiration from folklore and magic systems and ideas of ways of telling stories from those areas, and so those are really interesting to see some of the commonalities that you could see from story to story, but also how different they were, and different interpretations of things. So that was really fun. Usually in an anthology like this, I will like some of the stories and not like others, but I liked every one of these stories, 4 stars or above for all of them, so I ended up giving the whole thing 5 stars. I would say one of my favorite stories was about a jinn being captured and telling stories to his captor, so it was a story within a story, and they were also teaching stories, so I liked that a lot. And there was also one about a demigod type creature who was made from the ashes of a princess who had been murdered, and was kind of brought to life by the power of a god who was in love with that princess, and how she was like made for vengeance, and how she kind of grew and discovered more about herself. So yeah, those were a lot of fun. I really enjoyed that. I read most of it via audiobook, although the first few stories via physical book because it had to go back to the library, but was immediately available on Libby as an audiobook. So then we have Vampires of El Norte. This, I had heard a lot about it being kind of gothic horror type stuff, and how it talked about colonialism, but I hadn't heard as much about the romance. I had heard there was a romance, but I would say the romance is a slightly bigger part of the plot than the horror and fantasy adventure parts. And I really enjoyed it. It's a forbidden romance in that they are from different classes. She is an heiress of a rancho in Mexico. What was Mexico? I think it's in what was eventually taken over by the US type area. And then with a vaquero who worked on the ranch when he was a kid. They grew up together, and when they were little kids, their parents didn't mind them playing together, but they gradually, some more barriers were put in place when they hit puberty, and then she gets attacked by a vampire, and he thinks she dies, and so he runs away, because he's sure he'll get in trouble for having been present when she was attacked. And also he doesn't want to face her death. Most of the story kicks off when they are adults and they meet back up again and have a lot of hurt feelings going on because she feels like he abandoned her. She's having your common heiress problems of her dad is threatening to marry her off. While she is trying to prove her worth as a healer, more vampires attack. She needs to get saved by Nestor again. And so that's where we get into lots of dealing with vampires and also lots of dealing with this romance. So I really enjoyed it. I listened to this one via audiobook as well. And I'm really glad I did. I wasn't totally sure I was going to pick it up before this because I had checked it out once before. I'd never been in the mood before it had to go back to the library. But there is a book bingo to be entered to win a book from your bookshop wish list. If you with an entry for every bingo that is being put on by Lindsay from Lynn's Loves Lit on Instagram. And so one of the prompts was published in August of any year because her birthday is in August. And so I was looking up a bunch of books published in August of 2023, and this was one of those. So I decided to give it another shot, and I'm really glad that I did. It was really well done and had a lot of like classic elements of cowboy stories, but with a little bit different slant. I just really had a good time. 5 stars. Then we have Tagging Freedom by Rhonda Rumani, and this one is about 2 Syrian kids. One is Syrian American, and they're both about 13, 14, and our Samira is having a lot of classic middle schooler issues of trying to fit into clubs and having bullies and having best friend fights and stuff like that. Kareem, meanwhile, is in Syria at the very beginning of the Syrian Revolution in about 2011. And context to what was going on in the Arab world at the time and the various different revolutions and things like that, and art movements of the time are in the author's notes, so that was very helpful. So he is involved in the very beginning of that. He starts doing graffiti with his friends that is like anti-government, pro the people who have been protesting. His parents know how dangerous this is, so when they find out he's doing it, they send him to the US to be with his cousin Samira and her family. And so it's about them kind of figuring out that both of each other's problems are like real problems and worth caring about, but also that like speaking up for what's right is important, even if it could mean you can get into like trouble with your school or something like that. And so it's a lot about graffiti as a form of activism in art. I think it addressed all of those topics really well, so I gave it 5 stars. I'd love to know how your August reading went and any readathons or read-alongs or book clubs that you might have taken part in. I also read most of Never Whistle at Night for a book club by Michael LeBourne. I'll link some stuff below about that. He has a bindery, and he is someone who works really hard to promote Black and brown authors, and is actually working on publishing some Black and brown authors, so that's like very cool to look at. And that book club was actually co-hosted by another person who has a bindery, so I will link her below as well, because her whole focus is promoting and publishing Indigenous work specifically. And she actually has a bingo board going on right now as well for Indigenous lit, so I will also try to find that and link it below if you would like to get involved. I think that's everything. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!